I'm Manisha Gervais, the founder of the Power to Break Free Foundation. I'd like to share with you a resource I've created called the Power to Break Free Workbook. This is a trauma workbook for women who are victims and survivors of gender violence. And in this workbook, I created a tool so that women can help process whatever abuse they've endured in their relationships or marriages. It's very challenging to process that while you're in the middle of an abusive relationship, or even as you're trying to extricate yourself from an abusive relationship can take time and can be quite emotionally draining and challenging. So it's oftentimes in the aftermath of that where a woman can really start to sit down with what happened to me, how did this happen to me, and to really understand the cycle of violence and their abusive dynamics, so hopefully they can prevent this and never have to repeat an experience like that again. In the trauma workbook, I have this divided into several sections. So one of the sections on power control is to really define what is a healthy relationship. When we can understand what are the signs of a healthy relationship, we can contrast them with what's not healthy, like not being able to have a voice, not being able to express your feelings and to feel safe as you do so. We also talk about what are the different myths of abuse, the wheel of power, the dynamics, the pyramid of power that keeps us trapped, the relationship between an abuser and a victim, how violence escalates. What are all of the different red flags that we can learn beforehand so we can really recognize them when we step into that situation? I also go through a whole section on the different types of abuse. So not all victims experience every type of abuse. We hear about physical abuse a lot. That's visually easy to see and to identify, but there's also many other subtle signs of verbal abuse, mental manipulation and control. There's also sexual abuse, financial abuse, spiritual or religious abuse. And so I go through a whole set of exercises to help understand what are the signs of each of those, and have you been a victim of any of those other types of abuse as well. I have a whole section on abusers where we talk about what are the signs of this abuser during courtship, which maybe is very different than when they're in a marriage. So often in courtship, they can appear very charming, very deceptive, and how can we recognize those signs? We also talk about the different types of abusers and what are all the steps that go into creating an abuser so a victim can really understand this. The section on victims, we talk about female stereotypes and the female identity, and 9 specific steps it takes to become a victim, where you give away your power, you give away your voice. How exactly does that happen? This was something that was really important for me to understand. How could abuse happen to me? And I had to see all of the steps it took to break down my strength, my confidence, my resilience, to truly become a victim that felt trapped in my situation. We also talk about the different layers of emotional wounding, all of the effects of abuse in terms of PTSD, which can translate into physical and mental symptoms, and how we need to get help for this, but how those symptoms can linger even after we leave that abusive situation and we feel safe. Those PTSD symptoms can stay with us for a long time. Feeling trapped, and what are the different coping strategies that victims employ? How do we get trapped by our own belief system? The reasons that we might have for being silent and keeping our secrecy. And these are important things to help us get out of those situations. In the section on separation, I talk about the different myths of separation and all the reasons victims stay, and why community blames her for staying, because they don't understand all the subtleties and the complexities and the nuances of this. The steps a woman has to go through to evaluate change and to process her abuse are going to help her get that confidence and that motivation to separate from the abuser. In the section, getting help on safety planning and resources for victims and how to ask for support, and when children are involved, ways to intervene with children. What are all the myths about community involvement and the lack of support from community? What can we do to recognize that and to overcome those challenges? I talk about 7 different levels of community reactions. It's not easy if you've kept your abuse a secret for a long time to finally break your silence and only to be rejected by the community that you thought would support you. Maybe they don't believe your story or they're in shock, whatever it might be. I talk about community's 5 stages of acceptance so women can really process this and understand this. In the section on healing, I talk about 5 stages of healing. The very first step just being the recognition that I have been abused, I am a victim, and go through the other different stages of healing as well to process trauma and what is needed. I talk about forgiveness, about closure, about therapy and the different goals of therapy, and also many other healing modalities that can help, from acupuncture for PTSD, meditation, yoga therapy, and other types of somatic trauma resolution, other modalities that can benefit as well. They helped me in my own healing journey, and I like to educate other women about all the different tools that are out there to be able to get help. And then the last section of the workbook, I talk about moving forward. How do we embrace a new future? How do we find that resilience, that courage, that power to heal? I give affirmations and strategies for self-care, and even starting to think about entering into a new relationship. What are qualities that you would look for in a new partner who is not abusive? How do you want to be treated? How do you have healthy communication and healthy boundaries and respect in that relationship? So all of these resources are embedded within the workbook, all of the different categories that I just mentioned. It's a 100-page journal. There are many domestic violence shelters that offer this workbook as a resource for all the women that walk in their door. And I strongly encourage you, if you are trying to heal from your trauma, to think about using the Power to Break Free Trauma Workbook as a way to support yourself during that journey. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck in your own healing journey.